Two guys in the dark.
This story happened to me on October 27, 2021 at 3 a.m. I live on a farm in Canada, Saskatchewan. Now to have context for the story, we have to go back to when I was 10. When I was 10, I was outside doing chores at about midnight because I lost track of time. So I didn't go out for a while. Went out late because of it. I was doing my chores, nothing out of the ordinary, when I start hearing screaming sounds that sounded like a man and a woman being murdered in a field. It sounded extremely close. I asked my dad, "What do you think that is?" My dad said, "Oh, nothing. It's probably an animal or something." I decided to grab a kitchen knife because protection, even though it would do absolutely nothing, made me feel really safe. These sounds happen once in a while, every couple of months. Once a month, maybe twice a month at the absolute most. It's quite frequent though. Anyways, let's go back to the 27th of October. I went out at 3 a.m. because I forgot to cut a bale of hay from some horses. On my way back behind my house, there's one of them skinwalkers. Standing there, it was in the corner of my eye, so I didn't get a good look at it. But it did have huge legs and a really small head and neck. I didn't scream. I just ran back to my house. When I got inside, I told my sister. She didn't really seem to care, though. Anyways, these things keep happening. I don't know what to do. I live on a farm in the middle of nowhere, with fields on all four sides of my farm. I had decided to stay with my bestie, Karen, for a 3-day stay at her grandmother's place on the reservation. Her grandmother lives near a place called Tuba City, Arizona, in the middle of nowhere, but surrounded by rural homes. We go to college together, and I was kind of interested to know about Navajo tradition. The first day that we stayed, it was pretty chill. There was nothing out of the ordinary. But then her grandmother, not that old, she was probably around 67, said that a stray dog had come out of nowhere and just wouldn't leave. To me, it did kind of sound strange and ugly looking. It was black, shaggy coat, looked like a mix between a German Shepherd and a lab. That night we were watching a movie in the living room. We had big windows that looked out into the front porch where the cars are parked. Nothing fancy, with the curtains wide open. Her grandmother was in the kitchen cooking dinner, and we were watching a movie. Next to the window is a medium bookshelf, and the DVDs are kept there. Karen went out to go put back a DVD that we had just watched, but she freaked out because that stray black dog was staring at us through the window, standing on top of the wood box right outside. Not something normal dogs do from my point of view, or hers. Usually my dog, which happens to be a house dog, scratches the door to be let in. Res dogs aren't house dogs, and the dogs inside houses are frowned upon in Navajo tradition. It's meant to protect the house and the owner. The other dogs seemed to stay away from it. Karen opened up the door, yelled at it to get off the box. It ran off behind the shed. We went to go to Tuba City to get some groceries. We came back to the house. The dog was nowhere to be seen. Nothing unusual. Grandmother went to go visit some people, so it was just Karen and I. At about 5 o'clock, we heard someone trying to open up the door. Both of us looked out since there was no car heard, and no dogs were barking. Looking out the living room window to the door, and there was the dog trying to open up the door with its paws. 2 paws were wrapped around the brass doorknob, standing on its hind legs. I thought that was weird, but I wasn't really freaked out. Karen was. She opened up the door and chased it off. Grandma came back later. Karen had told her. Grandma didn't like what she had heard. Got ready to sleep. We slept in the spare room since it had 2 beds. One window with curtains opened just a little bit. We turned off the lights, but there was a sound coming from on top of the roof. Pitter-patter footsteps, and scratching sounds, and panting. It then sounded like it had just jumped on the large plastic water barrel that they had. At first, we heard what sounded like barking, but as it grew louder, the other dog seemed to be barking at something else. But also, all of a sudden, something was running around the house barking, and it was no dog. Nope, it wasn't. This barking sounded human. a deep male voice barking like it knew that we knew it wasn't a dog. Then started panting again by the window. We started freaking out. Karen decided to, in my opinion, which was stupid, open the curtains to look out. There was the stray dog on its hind legs, looking into our bedroom. But this time, it stunk, and what I thought were 2 black holes in the neck. Another pair of eyes twinkled. Think of those ugly, glossy spider eyes staring directly at you. And the paws were deformed-looking hands with overgrown, somewhat thick and sharp fingernails. Again, both screaming and shutting the curtains closed. Her grandma had came running through the door, and seeing it, first thing she did was grab ashes from the fireplace, loaded 3 shells into the shotgun from under her bed, bless herself in Navajo, and went outside to go shoot it, yelling in Navajo about how the thing wasn't welcome there, and to get the hell out of there, for it to go linger somewhere else. Both of them being traditional, the very next day they called a medicine man to come over and put cedar in. He prayed over everyone with cedar smoke and an eagle feather, blessed the place, made us eat bitter herbs called eagle's gull or something, and gave me an arrowhead. Apparently I needed to carry one for protection, and a little pouch called corn pollen. Seems to work pretty well. The medicine man said that the dog was a skinwalker, which in Navajo is a long word, but I call them Yoshis. The body of the stray dog, which was killed by the skinwalker, made an illusion so that we wouldn't know that it was a real dog. He also said that Yoshis tend to harm people by using some sort of human bone straw to spit at someone. Think spitballs, but only deadlier, and get human bones into them. Doctors can't detect it, but the medicine man that day had pulled a piece of human skull out of grandmother's right shoulder. It was pretty big, about 2 inches long and 1 centimeter thick. It was real because we watched him pull it out of her. That was pretty intense. My father owns a small delivery service that operates out of Farmington. We mostly deliver small packages out to the middle of nowhere that are too much of a hassle for the larger delivery companies to bother with. My dad is the only employee, and we have a few pickup trucks and a trailer. One day we get a delivery out to Window Rock, Arizona, on the Navajo reservation about 2 hours from Farmington. My dad gets the call for the job while he is chilling with his Navajo friend, Travis, and his girlfriend. Travis mentions how he's got a family in Window Rock, and that he hasn't seen them in ages, and suggests that they go with him. I was about 6 or 7 at the time. It was in the summertime, so Dad decided that we'll go down together. He can do his delivery really quick, and then while Travis sees his family, we can go check out Window Rock. It's a big rock face with a large hole in it that goes to the other side. It's pretty cool. We had to convoy in separate trucks since my dad was loaded down with freight. We decided to bring along some walkie-talkies so that we can communicate with one another. We spend our time in Window Rock. Everything is generally uneventful. We start heading home along the old highway with my dad and I in the front, and Travis and his girlfriend in their truck right behind us. I honestly don't remember most of the Window Rock, but this next part I can never forget. We're somewhere on the highway between Window Rock and Gallup. It had just rained earlier in the day, and the road was kind of slick, so we were taking it pretty slow. On the left side of the highway, there is nothing but sandstone cliffs, and on the right, there is a huge field separated from the road by a small barbed wire fence. We crest the top of the hill, and down at the bottom of the hill we see what appears to be a very large dog, sitting back on its haunches in the middle of the road facing the cliffs. My dad calls over the radio, "Hey Travis, do you see that big-ass dog?" Travis starts yelling back over the radio, "That's not a dog. Speed up right now and just hit it." He sounds almost hysterical. He just keeps screaming, "Hit it. You have to hit it. Please, hit that fucking thing right now." So my dad starts to speed up. As we get a little bit closer, I begin to see it a little bit more clearly. It's covered in its own brown, wiry, matted hair that appears to have dried blood all over it. It's still facing the cliffs, but the moment that our headlights hit it, it turns and looks at us, and it has a face. I don't know how else to describe it other than a mix between a bear's and a human's face. It looks twisted and distorted, almost like it was in pain. As we get closer to this thing, we start to realize that it's actually pretty huge. Though it was still sitting on its haunches, it is about a shoulder height from the hood of the truck. We get inches from hitting it when it lets out this scream that sounds like someone is screaming as their lungs are filling with water. It leaps backwards towards the field, landing just on our side of the barbed wire fence. Then with another leap, it was gone from sight. Travis comes over the radio again. "Holy shit, just keep on driving. We have to get out of here. We have to go faster." He kept repeating that last part. We have to get out of here, and we have to go faster. Pretty soon we are speeding like crazy, and just as we start to come near the outskirts of Gallup, we get pulled over. Travis pulls his truck over with us. Naturally, this makes the cop, a Navajo man himself, very on edge. He immediately asks why Travis felt that he needed to pull over as well. Travis says that we both saw a Skinwalker a few miles back. It's been following us. The officer immediately turns white, stammers something about a verbal warning, gets in his car, and then takes off. We do the same. We didn't see anything else that night, but when we got home, Travis refused to let us leave without taking some kind of Navajo totem thing that was supposed to keep it away. Anybody that has been on the Navajo reservation has either probably heard of some creepy things or have experienced pretty creepy things, namely skinwalkers. I've only seen one myself. I came from a small town in northern Arizona that's sandwiched between the Paiute Reservation on the north and the U.S.'s largest Navajo reservation to the south. My high school being very small, a 1A high school that has on average about 80 students enrolled every single year. Always had to travel south about 5 to 10 hours one way just to play another high school in any sport. This means that we traveled a lot on the Navajo reservation. We also usually stayed at hotels when we would head out to play and come home in the morning, but this trip was a little bit different. I remember the basketball coach saying that the school didn't have enough money to put up the teams in a hotel that trip, so we were going to be on the road for a total of about 12 hours. I was the only male senior to play basketball that season. We had just got done playing our game and headed home on our bus. We called it Big Blue. We were headed out. It wasn't very long, about 2 hours of driving before we had entered the reservation. By this time, everyone was asleep, with it being about 2 in the morning. When we had crossed the reservation's border, I noticed the bus driver had sped up and now was going about 85 miles an hour. I thought that this was a little weird because he never exceeded the speed limit, at least not in my high school career. For some reason, I couldn't fall asleep like the rest of my teammates, and I just sat at the back of the bus staring out across the desolate desert landscape that was lit up by the full moon. As I looked out, I could see a figure running towards the bus at an angle of pursuit and keeping up with the bus at 85 miles an hour. As the figure got closer, I saw that it was a humanoid form. As a matter of fact, it looked exactly like a human, only that the face was painted half black and half white with glowing eyes like a rabbit's eyes reflecting light from a spotlight. I immediately thought, holy crap, this must be a skinwalker. The thing ran up to the edge of the road and just kept up pace with the bus hurtling sagebrush and rocks while staring directly at me. After I made eye contact with the thing, I just couldn't look away. It was as if something was holding my head and eyes in place. The skinwalker just smiled at me, this humanoid smile that went ear to ear, showing crooked, yellow pointed teeth. I felt like I was going to throw up. I was panicking through the whole ordeal. The skinwalker started to crumple down on all fours, still keeping up with the bus. I could see his bones crack and reform hair starting to appear all over the skinwalker's body. In about 3 seconds, it was now a coyote. It ran off back into the desert, out of view. As soon as it was gone, I ran to the onboard bathroom and puked a mixture of food and blood. I didn't want to tell anyone for fear that they would think that I was crazy. I confided in my Navajo friend. She told me that I needed to see the chief, who also happened to be a friend of mine, and get a blessing. I saw him the next school day in the parking lot. He just came up to me, mumbled something in Navajo while waving a feathered scepter-like thing, turned around, and got into his truck and drove away. To this day, I haven't seen another skinwalker. It might be due to the fact that I moved away from that town and the reservation, and if I do have to go south, I go around, like way around. I was spending a month with my cousins at my grandmother's house. It was August, and my cousins' aged ranged from 10 to 15. I was the oldest. I was staying with a 10, 13, and a 14-year-old. We stayed up telling scary stories quite often, but one night a few weeks in, we decided to make a campfire out back. My grandmother's house is in a suburb area. The neighbors aren't too far when you're driving down the road to her house, but in the backyard, it's thick forest with man-made paths through it. Each house is on a hill, so only part of the basement was actually underground. That isn't very important until later, though. So we're towards the east side of her yard, in a smallish patch of open land. You couldn't see the neighboring yards from there, and there was probably 3/4 a mile to each side of us that belonged to my grandmother. It was maybe 11 at night. We were playing Truth or Dare after telling scary stories, and my 14-year-old cousin dared me and the 13-year-old to go walk through the path for 10 minutes or so. I happened to say yes right away, as I wasn't easily scared and rather level-headed, but my younger cousin was a bit more hesitant. We didn't bring a flashlight because it wasn't pitch dark yet, and we could see enough to not die. We were walking through the paths for about 5 minutes. We could barely see the fire through the trees when we decided to turn back around. In the middle of the path was a large dog-like creature, hunched over with its front hands an inch from the ground. What I remember most was how its eyes were so bright and white, and it was a humanoid dog-shaped with a human-like head, but a dog-like body, but human hands and feet. It looked right at us, and I know I was paralyzed with fear as it dashed away the opposite way from us, towards a creek that ran through the yard. Eventually my cousin and I screamed bloody murder, and the other cousins and my grandmother ran to us. I don't remember much here, because I was really disoriented, and I couldn't think properly. I did wake up in bed, so I assumed that I was brought up to the house. All the kids slept in the basement, in a big room with sliding glass doors to the outside. As the room was on the side that wasn't underground, my bed was pressed against a big glass window. I could see my cousins playing outside down below. The house happens to be in Michigan, so it gets really chilly even in the end of August. And there was a slight breeze, so I put on a jacket and ran to join them outside. Skipping breakfast, not wanting to miss out on anything fun. When I get down there, I could tell that they weren't playing, but rather running to go get my grandmother. Her dogs, both of them, were dead. They were ripped apart. That night we went to bed early. I woke up at maybe 2 in the morning because I felt something hit my head. My cousins were all sitting on the double bed opposite of me. That was on the other side of the room. There was 1 bunk bed and 2 double beds. The double beds for me and my 14-year-old cousin. They were being quiet and staring directly at me. The 13-year-old nodded his head towards the window. I froze. They all looked afraid. I turned my head slightly to the side, and I saw a really messed up looking face pressed against the window, with gaping eyes looking down at me. I screamed so loud, and it bolted. My grandmother called the police after I told her what happened. They didn't find anything. I went home after that, and I have never been there during the night ever again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.